Hi everyone, this is William with a special installment today of the Grand Duke Dmitri YouTube video series. I was about to say service, but it's not really a service. Okay, our recap for 1915, which was the previous video. Well, Dmitri had changed his mind about the book he was reading, The Iron Chancellor of Ancient Egypt, and finding it to be actually interesting. He was persisting with chess, even though he had so far lost every single game against Laming and become very frustrated about it. He was continuing on with that. And what I neglected to mention yesterday was that it was the first time in all of these diary entries for 1915 that he mentioned his father, that he mentioned Paul, and actually wrote him a letter. And the reason for that being that Maria had told him that Paul was ill. And so, he wrote his father a letter asking, "How are you?" So that was good. He was treating the war news pretty cavalierly at that point, just noting in passing that it was, more or less encouraging. Okay, so on to 1939, our last installment of that, the final, the conclusion of the Grunwald letter. Just for me, the most important thing possibly of the entire letter is that Grunwald felt like Dmitri, and to a certain extent even Maria, needed to step up at that moment in time and offer the emigre community a kind of counterweight or alternative to Vladimir Kirillich, who was very much in the Germanophile camp. All right, our cast today, we have a journalist named Jean Fayard, and we have the staff at the Georges V Hotel in Paris. So I should have said from the very beginning, this is the Candide article that I found out about through Grunwald's letter. Grunwald's letter was written on the 3rd of June. The actual interview that Candide did with Dmitri was at the very end of 1938. So we're not actually in 1939 today, although just about. It's 28th December 1938, so a few days from being away from being 1939. And I will just say at the outset that as you're not capable of doing your own analysis, but just for me at least, what I see is what Dmitri's doing here, because it doesn't sound at all like an incendiary article. I think the other interview was more so, but in this one he's just trying to keep things. He's trying to downplay things as much as possible. And do damage control, because Vladimir had made it clear that he was interested in the Nazis' proposal of making him the king of Ukraine, and that had outraged a lot of people, the right-thinking people. I would say that's my value judgment. And so Dmitri didn't want to see this thing explode, right? So he was, being his suave and charming self and doing some damage control. All right, so here we go. This is Candide, 28th December 1938. The title of the article, if you want to look for it, is, in quotes, "I am for Russia," and then, out of quotes, "a conversation with Grand Duke Dmitri on the subject of Ukraine." All right, here we go. This is Fayard writing in the first person. "A Grand Duke is never completely in exile. At the Georges V Hotel, where he welcomes me, Grand Duke Dmitri has the ease and manners of a lifelong Parisian. It would be the same in London, because his tall, slender build and his athletic bearing give him the appearance of a polo player trained by the Indian Army. He speaks French and English as readily as Russian, and the Slavic charm of that language only appears here and there in the form of a few rolled R's and a few sing-song endings. The hotel staff treat him with respect. The bartender asks, "Some tomato juice for Monseigneur?" The maitre d' announces, "I have an excellent table for Monseigneur between the window and the radiator." And the waiter recommends, "I believe the Navarin is excellent, Monseigneur." And yet this kindly respect does not intoxicate a prince who has known other splendors and also many melancholy years. You see, now we're quoting Dmitri here. "You see," he says, "we've been quite forgotten, all the Romanovs, for many years now. We've lived peacefully in a country that has offered us an admirable hospitality, but we didn't feel like we were much of anything. And suddenly, when it comes to Ukrainian affairs, someone unexpectedly talks to us about restoration, and people turn to us and come to see us. Is that what makes us so important? I asked to talk to you because I wanted to express my feelings to Candide about a matter that has already generated a lot of nonsensical and frivolous talk. I respect your publication. I find it honest and well written." Okay, so end quotes, and now we have Fayard addressing the readers. "I thank the Grand Duke for his kind compliments, but here I must digress and provide our readers with some background information on the key members of the imperial family." And there I'm going to stop before we go on to that very interesting part of the interview. Okay, so a little bit about Fayard. Jean Fayard, he was 37 years old, so about 11 years younger than Dmitri. He left memoirs, so I'm going to have to look into that. I've never looked at those. And yeah, he was from a publishing family, and he would end up writing a book. Well, he was also a novelist. He wasn't just a journalist, he was also a novelist. And he was from, so he wrote in 1941, I don't think it was a novel, I think it was an essay, but he wrote this essay called My Mistresses. So maybe he was the perfect person to go and talk to Dmitri. Anyway, yes, what does Dmitri mean when he says that a lot of nonsense and frivolity has been talked? Well, he's one of the people. He's not singling out Vladimir by name, but certainly saying that it was nonsense and frivolity was downplaying it a little bit, what Vladimir had said, but also, Dmitri's way of saying, okay, this is a 22-year-old, or this is, at that time, I think, a 21-year-old. And so don't take it seriously. Sophisticated people just don't think this way. It's all nonsense. So that, of course, would be something that was bound to incense any 21-year-old in any situation, with an older relative saying something like that publicly. All right, so, and the title, I Am for Russia. Well, I could use that as the title of my novel, but I think I'll stick to my original, The Prince and the Devil. So that's, that's what Dmitri wants to, one of the things he wants to emphasize to Fayard, and clearly did emphasize. Thus, Fayard uses it as the title of his own piece. In our day and age, knowing that this is about Ukraine, we would think that I Am for Russia is on, the the side of Putin. But this is a very, very, very different situation. So here Dmitri is not on the side of Ukraine being taken over, in this instance by the Germans. So I am for Russia. It goes further than just the Ukraine matter. Obviously, it also speaks directly to the idea that I am not for Germany because I am for Russia. Okay, so this statement of Fayard, and I really wonder what Dmitri thought about it, because he starts out by saying a Grand Duke is never really in exile. Well, I kind of think Dmitri and other Russians, not just Russians, but other Romanovs would have begged to differ with that. Yes, they were cosmopolitan. And in that sense, it's not the same as a person who is, has never traveled much, never learned a foreign language. And there were plenty of people like that who suddenly found themselves in exile in a foreign land. And it's not quite the same. And he also had all these relatives in the various royal families of Europe. So, yeah, that's a yin, right? Ja und nein. Yes and no. Yes, a Grand Duke is not in exile the way other people are in exile. But, he feels the loss of his homeland. Obviously, there's a great piece about what it's like to be a refugee or to be in exile by a writer named Jean Fayard, and he changed his name after the Second World War for obvious reasons, from Hans Meyer to Jean Fayard. He was the son of a Jewish father who was killed in combat in the First World War, and a non-Jewish mother. He was raised non-Jewish. But during the Second World War, he realized, of course, that he was Jewish in the eyes of, in the eyes of everyone else. So after the war, he no longer felt like a German, and he changed his name to a French name. He was living in Belgium. That's quite a digression. Sorry about that. Okay. And anyway, yeah, his book, At the Mind's Limits, has just this beautiful chapter in it about exile. Okay, let's see. So Dmitri, we're told, was looking athletic despite having tuberculosis. He wasn't quite as bad off as he would have been already in June, but still, the slenderness was not a healthy slenderness at this point. He was looking athletic. He was able to project that. He always had been a guy who loved sports, and of course, polo and golf. He was playing in tennis, maybe not at that point in his life. But he managed to project this image of himself, this bodily image of looking like an athlete, even though he was so desperately ill. So that's interesting. He was indeed at home in London, as we know. He was a very cosmopolitan person. And we finally get some details about how Dmitri talked. Maybe that's not something that, other people are so much interested, but I've always really wanted to know. I teach some ESL, English as a second language, and I'm interested in people's accents, and I'm interested in my friends who have children who are raised bilingual or even trilingual from the time they're very small, what they sound like. And so I've always wondered that about Dmitri. And, so basically what Fayard is telling us, that no, he doesn't have an accent in French. But here and there, you get this sort of Russian infusion. I don't know, that's the wrong word. He calls it Slavic charm. With the rolled R's, and with the sing-song ending of sentences. That, I have to be honest, I haven't noticed with Russian speakers speaking Russian. I've never, we think of Swedish, of course, with that kind of sing-song. I've never thought of that with Russian. But, yeah, I'll have to talk to some other people and some of my Russian friends and maybe listen more carefully. And maybe it wasn't Russian. Maybe it was just something Dmitri did. I mean, again, being bilingual and to a certain extent trilingual trilingual with French, Russian, and English, and also some German that he was taught as a child. You know, a lot of times when you have people who are speaking multiple languages like that they've been speaking since childhood, they do have a slight accent in every language they speak, and in some ways that what we would call an accent isn't necessarily referable to any of the languages that they speak. So it could have just been a unique thing to the way Dmitri spoke, rather than a Russian thing. Navaran, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. It's a French lamb stew. Sounds good. Kindly respect. So Dmitri is being treated with kindly respect. He's living at this hotel. He's not just he's not just coming there for the interview and they have lunch there together. He actually does live there, so he knows the staff very well. The staff at Schatzalp certainly thought he was a great guy. I think he treated people well. So kindly respect. Yeah, I'm not sure why Fayard emphasizes that it's kind of them. But maybe a better translation would be affectionate respect, that they actually do like him. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into that. So interesting that Dmitri says that the Romanovs are, it's been a long time since they've been taken seriously, and that they've been until now, they've been more or less forgotten. So I wonder if that was sort of more how Dmitri felt. He was always a sensitive person from the time he was a child, and maybe he felt like, he actually, in his diary entries in 1917, 1918, right after the revolution, was already reacting to this idea that the Romanovs were now nobodies. Not even nobodies, but in the eyes of a lot of people actually had a, negative image. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he in particular felt just forgotten and not taken seriously, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it was something that other members of the imperial family, perhaps, and also other Russian emigres felt. Okay, someone, all of a sudden, now we're talking about Dmitri saying, explaining what's going on. We were forgotten, and then all of a sudden, someone approaches us. I wonder who that would be. Well, the Nazis. And who did they approach? Vladimir. Okay, so there's a problem. He's not being incendiary in this interview. He's not naming names, as it were, at least not so far. But yes, someone has approached us, and we're important again. But why? Well, not for the right reason. Okay, so what do we have next time? Well, key members of the imperial family as we return to this Candide interview. So the Grunwald letter was 11 pages long, and the Candide interview, typewritten, is 5 pages long, so we'll be getting through it faster than the Grunwald letter. But the next section, I assure you, is just fascinating, because this is where not Dmitri but Fayard talks about Vladimir and talks about the other members of the imperial family. Okay, and when tomorrow we return to 1915, we have Balashova, the ballerina whom Dmitri said, "This is the woman I want." Her name comes up. And we will also be on the eve of Dmitri's departure for another little vacation in Moscow. So, yeah, come back for that. Thanks for watching. Bye.